With the boys. There's no girls on this podcast. I'm so lonely.
Yeah, you know.
Not
And
lonely.
to start this episode, for the patrons and the YouTube watchers, the Queen is dead and has been dead for months.
Oh, I think you should say that in the episode.
I'm saying it right now. This is a Patreon exclusive, YouTube exclusive.
You've got your
Conspiracy theory starts here.
You're hearing it
The
here
Queen
first,
of
folks.
England is dead and has been dead for months. She's dead as a doornail.
You know, this is why you come to our program for late breaking news on the British royal family.
There's going to be like I'm going to make a thumbnail. It's like the British people like, and then there's just like a dead queen.
Yeah, make one of our YouTube videos just fucking clickbait, you know, just not labeled like a
Is the Queen of England dead? Question mark. Here's how to find out.
You have to watch this movie podcast to find out.
And they're like, what the hell? When are they going to talk about the Queen? They're just talking about a 1920s German expressionist movie. It's fucking stupid. I need a conspiracy theory. All right, let's do it.
Oh, we're doing the count in?
Yeah, just you all just do what you want with the order. I'm going to say mine. I'm going to say my piece.
Andrew and Jess.
Okay.
All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 407 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford.
And Jess.
In today's episode, we're going to watch movies we watched this
week.
We're
going to watch movies.
We're going to watch movies that we watched this week. We're going to talk about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And then part 2, we're going to continue our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1926 Faust. And we're going to
spoiler alert. Rocks.
It was good.
We're gonna make no bargains. We're just gonna talk about it. All right. Well, we got some stink bombs to kick us off. So let's get into the stink bombs.
Well, Jessy and I just got back from a long international trip, and this is not a brag, but on our long international trip, we had some very long flights. And we were pleased to find that on American Airlines, you get free in-flight movies that you can watch on your phone.
This feels like a plug for American Airlines, and it's not a plug.
American Airlines, like all airline companies, sucks and probably should be nationalized.
Also, but first class, sorry, fuck off.
Yeah, they wouldn't let the people in coach go to the bathrooms in first class, which sucks. But anyways, they do have very nice,
a dumb, shitty little see-through curtain. That's not what we're here to talk about. But
it is now.
It's just let's talk about class struggles.
Anyways, they have a very nice big library of movies that you can watch on your phone. But you know, as the cinematary snobs that we are, we don't want to watch good movies on our phone
because the good movies.
Because watching a movie on your phone does kind of make it less of a good movie. IMO. Right, or it takes away from the viewing experience a little.
I suck at that.
Yeah, so we're not gonna watch like The Master like on our phone.
Right. Yeah. So we decided to watch movies that looked kind of shitty, but entertaining to watch. And so, obviously we started with Dear Evan Hansen, which was a movie that I was like inches away from going to see in the theater last year, just like to laugh maniacally to myself. Yeah. And now that I've seen it, I'm glad I did not do that because it's not really like funny to watch. It mostly just sucks, but there are things that are very funny about it. Jess, do you want to give the synopsis?
Oh God. Well, if you've heard anything about Dear Evan Hansen, then you've heard that you've heard people critique the fact that the main actor Ben Platt, is that his name?
Ben Platt,
who is an artist, like a musician. He is the main actor in the movie.
Also the nephew of the producer of the movie.
Okay, well, that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. Anyway, they got him in there, but he's playing a high schooler and he looks so old. But it's just like it's kind of comical compared to other actual high schoolers that are not really. They're all old. They
No
all
one
look
is
too
an actual
old.
high schooler.
They all look too
he
old. But
especially
he
is
looks
not.
So anyway, but we don't have to get into that so much. But
Please,
it's just,
can we? Because it's great.
it's
Like
there's
this man looks like he came out of the like he just got a catheter removed and then got a colonoscopy and then came into this movie as a high schooler. It's
and
amazing.
there's so many scenes where he looks so distressed and
Yes.
he's crying and his like forehead is so crinkled, and that's fine, brother. Like me too, but also I'm almost
But you're
30.
not in high school.
I mean,
I'm almost 30.
It's not just that it's what Zach's saying too, or no, it's what you're saying, Jess, about like how distressed he looks. It's not just that his face looks old, which like I can kind of
And by
suspend my
old we
disbelief.
mean like 30, mid-30s, like
yeah,
like
yeah, like as old as me, basically, which is kind of what his age is, I think, more or less. But it's like he looks like a maniac. Like and I said this on Letterboxd, this is probably an ableist thing to say in a movie that is like kind of about mental health or tries to be about mental health, but like dude looks extremely upsetting every time you look at him. Like he is just always has the most distressed look on his face. He is just like staring into the camera with these big bug eyes.
He's a mess too. His character's a hot little mess. But anyway, what is not good about the movie? Oh God. First of all, the movie is kind of like a direct rip almost on World's Greatest Dad. You know, one of Robin Williams' last movies. It's weird, but that one's better, even though the premise of that movie is this guy's shit son dies while masturbating and he makes it look like a suicide. And this movie like has like a more touching core of a premise, I guess, but
let's talk about the premise of this movie.
The premise of this movie is we're just going in here. The premise of this movie is this guy has like extreme severe anxiety. He has like no friends and he's like a senior in high school. And then he randomly kind of bumps into another student in the high school who's kind of a loner too, who has like a history of being in and out of like substance abuse programs and stuff like that. They kind of have like an awkward encounter, but it's pretty minimal. But at one point the guy like signs his cast because Evan Hansen has like a cast on because he fell out of a tree, and you learn more about that later. But anyway, the guy signs his cast and he's like, great, now we'll both look like we don't have no friends or something like that. And then that guy like later that day or whatever ends up killing himself. And so Evan's got like this guy's name on his cast, and he like wrote a letter to himself, which was like an assignment by his therapist. He's supposed to write letters to himself, and the letter that he happened to write said, "Dear Evan Hansen, blah blah blah."
This is such a convoluted setup for a story. I hate it.
I'm like super sad, and nothing is gonna get better, and I wish I could just disappear. The guy who kills himself finds the letter and like makes fun of Evan Hansen, and then puts the letter in his pocket. And then the family finds that letter in the guy's pocket, and then assume that he and Evan are best friends. And Evan is so socially awkward that he kind of lies about it. And he's like, yeah, I guess we were friends or whatever, because the family's like putting so much pressure on him to share stories and stuff like that, even though he literally has none. And he just like gets into himself in this awkward situation. And then it becomes like much bigger of a lie than he means for it to, where like people all over the world are like donating money to this cause, and he gives a speech about how this guy was his best friend, and the plot just gets so out of control and ridiculous.
There is a YouTube video that goes viral of him giving a speech, and the name of the YouTube video, I shit you not, in the movie, the YouTube video's name is "His best friend died ... or his best friend committed suicide ... You'll never believe what happens next."
Which is how we're gonna title all of our videos on YouTube. Cinematary talks Faust ...
You'll never forget.
You'll never forget what happens next.
And like the movie does eventually wrap around to, this is kind of a shitty thing for him to do.
Yeah.
Right.
He dates the guy's sister.
Kinda.
At one
he
point.
dates his sister that he has a crush on, who he's been like kind of creepily looking at from across the hall for like years.
Reminding you, this is a 34-year-old man.
Yeah.
The guy, Ben Platt, is 34 years old.
I don't know. It just
Oh,
looks
he
like
looks
something like
Anyway,
that. Yeah.
the plot like is weird and kind of out of control, but like that whatever, that's fine. But the movie is supposed to be a musical.
Yeah.
We've got a star-studded cast. We've got, I guess, apparently famous actor / singer Ben Platt ? But then we've also got Julianne Moore,
Yeah.
and
Amy
Adams,
Girl
and
from The Hate U Give. I forget her name.
other like younger actors who are famous, whose names I don't know, but they're famous, trust me. Anyway, we've got like a lot of star-studded people. So like they've obviously put some money into this movie, but the musical scenes are so awkward and uncomfortable.
Yes.
I mean, I think we're at a point where America's not really putting out a lot of musicals anymore. Like, I think we had an era, maybe in the mid 2000s or something, where we were kind of putting out a bunch of musicals, and
We keep trying.
before that,
We keep trying to make musicals.
earlier in movie history, that was a much more popular medium. But now it's like this movie makes it feel like we don't know what we're doing at all with regards to making a musical. Like, there's a scene where one of the first singing scenes, well, the movie starts with a musical scene and it's weird, but one of the first like profoundly weird ones is this scene where Evan is driving Julianne Moore, who's his mom.
This is the first one.
But I think it starts with him singing too.
It starts with him singing alone in his bedroom, but we eventually get to the scene you're describing.
Right. So, I think with a lot of musical movies or things you see, it's either like the person is like having this like whole private monologue musical moment to themselves,
Dancer
and like
in
the
the
world
Dark
around
style.
them don't really like acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Or it's like in the universe, everyone is singing, but then we don't acknowledge it. Like, let's break out into a song. Anyway, let's go to lunch now. Right. That's kind of, but in this one, it was like this really odd, people are acknowledging that he is saying something, but not that he's singing.
And then he's often the only one singing. And like it's a film craft thing too, because usually whenever we go into that mode in the musical where like the character is having their private moment or everybody's bursting into song, the way the film is shot kind of changes. Like it kind of snaps into this more rhythmic musical style. And that does not happen in this movie at all. It's just shot reverse shot of people sitting across a table from each other, and one of them happens to be singing for a long period of time.
So one of the most awkward scenes is one of the first musical scenes. Evan is like getting driven to school, and he's singing to himself. Yeah. And Julianne Moore, his mom, just kind of looks at him like from across and is like smiling and nodding very knowingly, like
patting his shoulder.
You're singing.
The acting of it is so awkward, but he's not like singing to her. She's just sort of like there witnessing it, but also she's not witnessing it because like other scenes where he does singing, people are just kind of interacting like he just talked to them.
The movie has a very strange/strained relationship to reality on many levels, and one is like the reality that the characters are living in, right? My favorite example of this is the second song, I think, which is the song where he tells his first big lie about this story that he supposedly had with the non-friend who committed suicide. And he's sitting around the dinner table with the friend's family, and they're asking him to tell a story, and he does it via song. And again, we're just getting like these long shots of his face as he's singing and like reverse shot reactions to other people. And they're making these like amazed expressions, and in some almost like an aghast expression, because they're like hearing about this side of their son they've never heard about before, right? Their dead son. But like on a meta level, it's like, why is this man singing to me? That is the feeling that it seems like the actors are experiencing while they're sitting across the table from Evan Hansen, who's just all of a sudden singing this horrible song, by the way. None of these songs are good at all.
Oh yeah. So the framing of all of the songs is almost like just really awkward and not cinematically interesting, but also just sort of awkward to watch. The songs themselves are not good. The singing isn't bad per se, but the songs are just not catchy. They're not interesting.
They all
They're
sound
just
the same.
they're equally like increasingly oh god, we're doing another song right now. I wish this was just a dialogue scene and not a whole ass song.
There's no dancing either.
Oh, there is one
Except
scene
one
with dancing,
song.
and it's actually like maybe the best song / scene of the movie, like the strongest, but even that was kind of like, oh, okay, we're singing a song about the things, like emails about things that you did with this guy. And they have like the two guys like dancing and they're kind of joking about it, and I don't know. That's like maybe
That's the best premise we got,
struggling
people.
to put into words how it's a mind-blowing truly that we could make a movie this poorly made that almost certainly had so much money poured into it. Like, you've got a musician, you've got these like actors who really know what they're doing, and yet like you guys made a movie that it seems like you've maybe never seen a musical in your life, or like didn't consider, does any of this music, is it good at all? Like, is this and then one of the most bullshit plots of the whole movie was they start this mental health awareness club
Oh my god.
about this kid who
Oh
has
my
killed
God.
himself. That's nice as a school counselor. Like that's a
Yeah.
nice thing to happen. And then they decide in their club that they're going to raise money.
$100,000.
$100,000 they've decided to raise. And you'd think like, okay, cool, we're gonna, mental health, that's a real, I can contest. That would pay like 2 school counselors' salaries, or like 2 social workers' salaries, or like a therapist's salary. I mean, like that much money could add so much to like a mental health community. There's so much that I could do. So you're thinking like they're gonna raise this money to do something for mental health. No. They want to donate $100,000 to an orchard
because
the kid liked it.
According to a fake story that Evan Hansen made up, that was the kid who committed suicide's favorite place to go.
And they're like, yeah, it's kind of a little run down. We should definitely donate $100,000 so that they can like perk up this orchard. Like,
that's gonna fix mental
nice, but that's a lot of money. And anyway, it just blows my mind that that's a plot that they care so much about. They're like, they get like the whole world like watching these videos about mental health and donating money, but the money they're going to donate to isn't even going to like save somebody else's life or like directly make a change towards like the cause of like suicide awareness or suicide prevention. No, it's about making this random apple orchard in this one town.
I know
that this one kid happened to like a little bit.
If anything, that's a deep truth, because quite honestly, that's how any campaign goes. Is they go, we're gonna solve this issue, and then it just goes to something meaningless and doesn't solve anything.
And I know
that's
that
truly American.
An apple orchard does sound kind of poetic and symbolic, and like people go out in nature for therapeutic purposes sometimes.
I do, but
I think that on an actual practical level, this is about as effective as if you like reopened the guy's favorite Burger King or something. Like, why? What are we doing here?
He really loved that Burger
King. So yeah, I mean, it's mostly really boring. It's 2 hours. I think it's over 2 hours long. And once the shock of just how weird Ben Platt looks and how badly this musical sequences are shot wears off,
pretty bad.
You just have to sit there and watch the rest of this awful story.
Like, this is like, there's nothing interesting about this movie. There's not really anything well done about this movie. The music is garbage. The acting is meh. The story is just goofy, and I can't believe it got like a wide mainstream theatrical release.
Well, there
are arguments to be made that a couple of the things that they do with mental health are good, but the fact that it's a bad movie kind of outweighs all that.
If anything, it hurts mental health.
It does. Yeah, you're stigmatizing mental health anew by attaching it to this horrible movie.
I mean, I kind of wanted to jump off a bridge after watching the movie, so it didn't help me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ben Platt kind of does an interesting portrayal of like anxiety for Evan in the first like scene.
His uncle gave him a free job. I mean,
I
It's
think
a bad
that
movie with bad people.
the things that it does well with mental health are mostly related to the girl from The Hate You Give,
Yeah.
who I forget her name. Sorry. I think that the stuff they do with Ben Platt's character is like way overcooked. I think that he is playing it too extreme to actually, and maybe there are people with anxiety who find his specific performance to be something that they recognize about their self. But I have a little bit of anxiety myself, and also have a lot of students who suffer from anxiety. I do not recognize this human
I
being.
think that people with anxiety, maybe it's not fair to generalize, aren't as gonna be as like eloquently vocal about like what they're experiencing. Like Evan has these total shutdowns, but he's like, I'm shutting down because my anxiety, and like he's like really
Yeah.
verbal about it. And I think most of the time, I don't know. It was interesting though, I guess, but then like he gets the girl to pay attention to him, and then suddenly his anxiety is magically gone. So
Yeah.
he's like a different character after like the first 15 minutes of the movie because family is being nice to him.
They're
By
being
accident.
like weirdly generous to this movie.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
sucks.
don't watch it, and I mean, or do if you do, grab a several drink, and then know you're gonna waste your evening. But
You're gonna have to watch it with other people. You do
watch
not
it,
want to watch
or
this
watch
by
it when you're
yourself.
stuck on an airplane
Yeah.
for 4 hours flying out of the country
And you're on an
on your
iPhone.
on your phone
On an iPhone.
on
yeah.
an iPhone. Also, it's really funny because like the moment you land, like the moment the wheels hit the like landing strip, the terminal, the free get to watch movies thing like blips off immediately. They're
Immediately.
like, you can only watch this when we're in the air, and the moment it touches down, they're like, fuck you, find your own way to watch this movie. You're on your own, kid.
Well, Dear Evan Hansen, if you would like to torture yourself, is on HBO Max. So
You can also book a flight through American Airlines.
Yeah.
and
or
watch
book
it
a
that way.
flight through American Airlines and check it out. Whichever way you want to, hurt yourself. There you go.
Wow.
All right, let's talk about your second terrible movie.
Luckily,
Ooh.
we went ahead and watched more movies on our flights, and we watched some good ones, but we didn't want to talk about those. We want to talk about Bridget Jones's Diary.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the ones that, when we were kind of creating our romance series, it was one that I kept seeing on a lot of lists for greatest romances or most popular romances or pink cinema kind of things. I just never gotten around to watching it. I actually used to really love Renee Zellweger too, so it's kind of surprising I never got around to seeing it. But so we watched it for the first time.
We were also talking about that romance series doing something by, and I'm looking up his name now, Richard Curtis, who did Love Actually and About Time and Notting Hill. It's Four Weddings and a Funeral was one we almost put on the list because like he is a notable name, especially Love Actually in like the canon of romance movies.
And I actually have never seen any of the other ones either. Like, so I need to. I guess I should see the rest of them. But
he wrote Yesterday. You've seen that?
I wasn't very good. Anyway,
the ones he directed are better.
The ones he directed are better.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, Bridget Jones' Diary is not good at all. And we're gonna break down exactly why it's not good. Let's see if we can do this let's see what our drive-through version of this is, like a quick speed run of why Bridget Jones, everything that sucks about Bridget Jones' Diary.
Well, number one, the way that it handles body image and weight.
Oh my god.
So the film is kind of structured as a diary.
Yeah.
I know it's also a book, and the book is probably actually structured as a diary. But in the movie, you just get like occasional voiceover of her kind of checking in and telling you like how things are going in her life in general when we're kind of outside of like actual dramatic scenes. We're like montaging through stuff.
Yeah. The like opening lines, anytime she's like doing a diary entry, the opening lines are always, here's how much I weigh right now. Here's how many like units of alcohol I have drank today.
Right.
Here's how many cigarettes I have smoked today. It's like just this instant like shaming thing.
She's tracking her weight, and she's like talking about how like basically she needs to starve herself in order to
Yeah.
get that number down for the next diary entry. And that is completely unquestioned the entire
Yeah.
movie. Like that is just a cool, quirky thing that she does.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with that.
She never, I mean, and what's insane, so I've been somebody who I've lost like weight in the last couple of years. And it's been, really since COVID, I've taken on a lot of like therapeutic practices that have helped me kind of get in a better place. I guess mentally in a way, but also like in shape, and that's been good. So I've lost weight and it's been very steady, but like Bridget, I've been somebody who struggled with body image my whole life as a woman, and have been very like conscious of my weight and stuff like that. And I can tell Bridget and anybody listening, if you're getting all fixated constantly in this shame spiral about like what you're gonna weigh, you're never gonna fucking lose weight. It's only gonna make you feel bad about yourself all the fucking time, and it's never gonna go away. And that's
unless you like
unless
get an
you're hurting
actual eating
yourself.
disorder and
Yes.
start like hurting yourself, right?
And so
don't
like,
do that.
and it's so insane too,
Yeah.
because like Renee Zellweger is a very just normal looking body type person, like fairly petite person.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the movie, she says something like, weight 135 pounds. I would really like to lose 20 pounds. It'd be like 115. That's like, and she's not, I'm short. And like 135 is like a very healthy weight range for somebody like me. She is definitely taller than me. And if she would put herself to 115 pounds, she would be tiny. That would be like,
both she and other characters in the movie refer to her as fat, like out loud. And like, not that you should refer to anybody
Yeah.
like in that kind of derogatory way as fat ever.
Wait,
Yeah.
FAT or PHAT?
no,
FAT,
just like, yeah, they like,
but like
dog
Renee
on her.
Zellweger just isn't.
She's
right?
just not.
Yeah.
And I mean, but the thing is, like, I think when the movie came out, people, I mean, I know that type of person, and I've, at times kind of felt like I was that type of person, and I know that that type of person existed. And so that's the sad thing, I think, just to see that on the outside, the way how she's so hyper fixated on it and like shaming herself about her body image and stuff. And so that alone, I think, is just like a really toxic thing to focus on so much, and because they don't ever do anything with it. Like the whole movie, it's like, haha, I'm still like basically an alcoholic. Haha, I still wish I would lose weight. What a dumb bitch.
Yeah.
And
We haven't
just,
really
like,
mentioned that this is a romantic comedy.
It's,
right?
yeah,
Like,
so
this movie is not about those things at all.
No, it's not. And
Yeah.
so, but the movie is about Bridget, and it's one of those rare movies, I think, where the woman kind of is like a hot mess, and also has like a lot of sexual like autonomy as a person. And I wish the movie had actually explored like, Bridget kind of just owning her sexuality more so. Like there are scenes where she's kind of in an awkward position wearing an outfit that's more provocative than like everybody else, but then just sort of like taking ownership of it, or deliberately wearing things that are very titillating, like at her workplace to titillate somebody. And so I kind of like the positivity there, but she's also just like kind of an obnoxious human being of a character. Like she's not one of those characters who like she still looks like she's flailing, she's like a hot mess, but then when the moment of truth comes and she's got to like deliver a line, or she's got to like do a dramatic moment or something like that, like she nails it, and you're like, wow, she's like a really cool character. She just is like really awkward and sort of rude a lot of the movie. Or just
also like genuinely unintelligent,
not professional. I don't know. Yeah. Like she,
it feels like the movie is making fun of her when
Yeah.
it should be a movie like from her perspective, like showing her humanity, right?
Right.
This
I
is
guess
her
yeah.
diary.
For a movie that I guess I thought it was gonna like play up on her like vulnerability and her touchingness, but it just really, I don't feel like they wrote a very interesting character. I feel like they wrote a character that's annoying, but not in like a fun way. And then the biggest plot of the movie for Bridget is that she sleeps with her boss, played by Hugh Grant, and then they kind of enter into a relationship. And Hugh Grant sort of implies always from the get-go that he's really just like a casual sex kind of guy, and Bridget pretty much knows all from the get-go that he's a casual sex kind of guy, but they sleep together like once or twice, and then she's decided, oh, we're dating and we're in love and we're in a relationship. And twist, big surprise, that's never what he wanted. He was never that kind of guy. So when things blow up in her face and she gets all sad and like goes into this like alcoholic doom spiral, she's like, what, guys, men are terrible and I hate them all and blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, this is just, nobody knows how to communicate. Like, he never really properly communicated, hey, I'm not really like about a monogamous, serious, committed relationship. And she like never asked, like, are we compatible, because this is what I want. They both just sort of pretended.
The way this relationship starts is some real like workplace harassment shit that gets played for laughs, specifically because like Hugh Grant's hot and she's into it.
Yeah.
You know, but like
he emails her and says, your skirt is so short and it's like turning me on. Basically, he emails her.
He grabs her ass in an elevator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh my God, I can't believe that he like isn't faithful to me and cheated on me and stuff like that. And I'm like, girl, you knew this guy sucked.
Yeah.
And you guys both just should have had an open conversation about. That's what is so irritating about me, is like she acts like he's this big like evil monster, and he isn't cool. He cheats on her. That's not okay. But at the same time, like, he should have been pretty upfront about like what he wanted, and she needed to be like a little realistic about.
And I think that, you know, a movie can portray toxic dynamics in a way that is interesting and insightful.
No.
But this movie is not interesting or insightful.
No.
It is just kind of like normalizing a bunch of really bad shit.
Yeah.
And it's also like a pretty boring and poorly shot movie.
Yeah,
too.
like they draw so much time and attention on like how she drinks so much that she's like falling over and like getting sick, and it's like, this is how I cope, hee hee ha ha. And they don't like really engage with that or decide whether or not that could actually hurt her life. They're just like, isn't she such a mess? Haha, Bridget. Anyway, then she ends up getting what she wants. Like, she ends up this guy
learning nothing, by the way.
She ends up learning
There's
nothing.
No character arc here.
There's no like, actually,
There's two other movies,
I don't
you know.
actually need a man. I don't need. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a rom-com. It's gonna end how it's gonna end, with the characters ending up together. But Hugh, what's the other guy's name?
Colin Firth.
Colin Firth.
Mr. Darcy.
He just, like, their entire relationship is, she shows up to some random work parties sporadically over the course of several months, and he like gawks at her from across the room and sees her and decides that he's in love with her.
He doesn't even gawk. He just like politely glances at her. There's no romantic arc for those characters at all.
There's such minimal interaction, other than like they just bump into each other at some workplace parties here and there. And then he has this scene where he basically confesses that he's super into her, and she's like, oh my gosh, he's so into me. I'm like, why? What does he have to be into? He's just bumped into you at some random like professional development meetings. What is this relationship?
Apparently in the second movie she finds out that he's a conservative, and that's like a conflict in the second movie. And like, I'm screaming, you don't know this guy. Yeah. Like, why are you committing yourself to this?
So they have this relationship where they just have bumped into each other here and there. Then he confesses his love to her, blah, 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 blah. He accidentally gets engaged to somebody else, blah, 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 blah. And then he gets this job in America, but then she confesses her love to him, even though they literally have never even kissed. They've never gone on a date. They've just bumped into each other at some work parties. And so he quits his job from America, moves all the way to England to like start a life with her. And it's like, they don't know each other. Why did you have not even dated? You don't hardly know each other at all. This is the message that you're trying to send to us? Why?
Grand romantic gestures.
Make better romance movies. Bridget Jones' Diary is a dumpster fire. It is terrible like messaging towards women. The romance is just like so unrealistic and ridiculous. People don't know how to communicate. People don't know how to have sex and how to date. Get better, folks.
I think the moral of the story for this portion of part one of the podcast is that, you know, musicals and rom-coms, both generally dismissed by the broader public as like frivolous girl stuff usually.
Yeah.
But there is an art to making them. And when you make them, you got to make them good. And these are not good ones.
There are so many great examples.
Yeah.
Just do better, folks.
Well, if you would like to continue to torture yourself Bridget Jones's Diary is also on HBO Max. So just
Or-
have a
book
day
a
of
flight on
self-hate.
American Airlines.
Or book a flight on American Airlines.
Get a 3-hour flight. No, give a 4-hour flight and watch both of them.
Double feature.
There you go.
Most expensive iPhone movie ticket of your life.
All right. Well, y'all have talked for 33 minutes about movies you didn't like. So
True.
let's cleanse the palate and also
Yes.
discuss a movie that has romance and musical numbers and is actually good.
You know who can do romance and musicals, especially musicals, like none other? Bollywood, baby. Bollywood can.
Let's talk about Triple R. Let's talk about
it.
Triple R.
Is that what we're calling it?
RR.
I mean, I can call it RRR if you want.
Yeah.
You mean like them Lord of the Flies movies?
Yeah, I mean, it's Triple R. It's directed by S.S. Rajamouli. It is a Indian Telugu language film. So it's a fictional recounting, but I'm going to pretend like it's real. Of two revolutionaries in like the 1920s in India who come together, are big time bros, and they realize they got to take down the British Empire. As we've learned through the course of history,
You got to do it to him.
you got to do it to them, and it's crazy. So it runs about a little over 3 hours, but it's a Bollywood movie.
That's normal. Yeah.
Yeah, and the first part of it kind of lays out the story. The story is the main crux of the story, without getting into too much, is that you start in this village, kind of in rural India, and these British soldiers and this British commander are there, and this little girl is singing and doing like this kind of tattoo art on this woman who is the wife of the commander. And after she's done, they flip 2 coins to the mom and take the girl with them, and so the one character in the movie, what's his name, Bahim, he leaves the village with a number of men to go and try to go to Delhi and come back and bring the girl with them. At the same time, you have Raju, who is you get more on his backstory along the way, but he is an officer within the British Army in India. And he's kind of attempting to rise up the ranks through the British Army there and kind of have a bigger place of power within the establishment. But along the way, as they're going, there are 2 different ways, and you kind of learn, it's not super spoilery, that Raju is searching for Bahim, but he doesn't know it's Bahim, and Bahim doesn't know that Raju is a cop who's seeking him to stop him from trying to save his sister, or just somebody in the village who he knows. I don't think they're technically related. And along the way, so at first they meet and they have like this incredible moment where this train is like blows up under this bridge and is going to fall, and there's this kid in the water who's trying to catch fish, and like Raju is on the top of the bridge and Bahim is on the shore with this village, and they like look at each other and they like have like a signal to each other, and then they like just connect, and like Bahim goes up on the bridge and they have this whole moment where they're like it's like and they save this kid, and it's fucking awesome. Like really, this movie is insane. One, it's just insane. Like there's so much just crazy ass action in this. It leans a lot on CGI. They have a lot of animals like tigers and wolves and stuff, but it's all like CGI animals because a lot of the time they're just like like having to fight off tigers. But the action sequences, I would recommend before you watch it, if you'd want, watch like a clip on YouTube or something. There's you're introduced to Bahim, and he's like running through the woods, like sprinting through the woods, being chased by a wolf, and then the wolf starts getting chased by a tiger, and so then he has to like get rid of the wolf and chase off the tiger. When you meet Raju, he's like at this this kind of uprising in this small village outside of Delhi, and he like there's a guy who like throws a rock and hits the British officer there, and he's like, "Get that man!" And so Raju like just like jumps over the fence and just starts fighting people in this giant mob. Is like fighting people until he can get to this guy, and it's just like this prolonged, like almost 10-minute long sequence where he's just fighting. It's almost, it reminds you of like a scene out of like a Resident Evil game or something, or it reminded me a lot of like Kingdom Hearts, where they would just have a gazillion characters and you're just like fighting them off, and there's no logic to it.
Or like the Dynasty Warriors games, if people know those.
Yeah, it's like that, where you're just like, what's going on right now? But honestly, some of the most intricately designed action sequences in a long time. There's an amazing action sequence at the end where it's like bow and arrow versus guns, and what's different is it's like it's not it's less like Tom Cruise, like very, or like John Wick, very like there's a little bit of like that hand-to-hand stuff. It's more just you kind of have like this change. The camera just kind of swirls around. They utilize CGI really well, where there's just like these kind of bends in motion that that just feel like really surreal. But at the same time, you have a number of like dance numbers. You have this one, the one that kind of stood out to me is you have this one section where they go to not a wedding, but like a very well-dressed party. And there's like this English guy who's like, "You guys can't dance." and they're like, and they're it's two bros, and they're like, "Yo, let's dance." And they have this incredible, they do this sequence where they have like suspenders, and they're doing like this whole like where they're dancing along with their suspenders, and they're playing with the suspenders, and kind of it reminds you of like Gene Kelly and Donald O'Connor and Singing in the Rain or something. That like it's a very like short, like 30-second bit that is more intricately thought out and executed than the last 25 years of American musicals.
Are we excluding Magic Mike XXL from this equation?
I don't know if that's a musical.
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty it's just like the way it just really has like this energy to it, and this this sincerity that is just real. Like, I mean, for the first half of the movie, it's just like two bros becoming friends and being bros. It's a great dudes hangout movie.
Yeah,
it sounds great. I can't wait.
And then the second half is more, the revolt against the British Empire, which is also cool because it's like this like deeply anti-British movie that's wonderful. I watched it last weekend during the Platinum Jubilee bullshit that they were celebrating for the dead Queen, and and I thought that was the only way that you could celebrate this is this this anti-imperialist action movie that just kills all the British people.
Do you want to explain why we're referring to the Queen as the dead Queen, or we're just going to leave it at that?
No, she's dead. I mean, there's nothing really to discuss. She's dead. But yeah, I will say I'm not there. I guess from reading a number of reviews on Letterboxd and other places, there's a lot of I get one of the issues is so it's on Netflix. But it's in Hindi subtitles, so it's not in its traditional Telugu language, and there's been a lot of issues about like its portrayal of Hindi language icons and such compared to Telugu icons.
But if you're watching it with English subtitles, how does that matter? Oh, I'm a little confused.
It doesn't, but there's a lot of, again, this is kind of our Western like we just don't pay attention to anything except for stupid America. And
so are you saying that like there's not an option for the subtitles of the language they're actually speaking?
No, there's no way to watch it in its traditional language. You're watching subtitles of another. And so I guess there's an issue with it being Hindi as well, because there's kind of a push and pull culturally between Hindi, the Hindi language and the Telugu language that I'm just ignorant of. There's a really good Letterboxd review that I would recommend checking out. I'll have to find it at some point, but that really kind of puts it into perspective, kind of breaking down some of the issues, because you also have there's a lot of and it made me think after. I still really like the movie, but you think a lot about like kind of the portrayals of the characters And it reminds you also that like, America is like propaganda central. But there's also different forms of, there's also every other country and nationality also kind of has its forms of propaganda that it perpetrates. And I guess there's a lot of anti or more pro Hindi imagery compared to more Telugu imagery, and that kind of rubs people who are from that area and speak that language wrong. And so a lot of people have issues with this movie because of that.
Do you have thoughts about it as a propaganda film in comparison to like Top Gun Maverick?
No, because I don't have the I'm not familiar, or I don't understand. I mean, I understand it on a theoretical level, but I'm not well versed enough to understand the conflict there. I just kind of read it and processed it and was like, okay, like but I don't know enough about it to be able to speak to it as a propaganda film. I mean, it's probably as much propaganda as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just on like a movie making level, it's just such a insane, spectacular watch. It really does. The issues that some people have raised that I would agree with is that the Raju character really gets more to do and more complexity to his character than the Bahim character, who's just kind of like this really strong, really genuine, but kind of oafish character. Compared to Raju, who is just like this kind of traditionally handsome, complex character who pretty much is like a superhuman the entire movie. And that is kind of true. They kind of leave him to the side. You also have the Bahim character who falls in love with like one of the daughters or somebody related to the British commander who's there, the British officer who's there. And you kind of have like this, kind of half-baked weird romance between the two of them that you don't really understand. But overall, it's hella fun. It's a great time. It's easily one of the most fun movies I've seen this year. And I would recommend I get that, you're rolling your eyes as you're listening to this at 3 hours, but you probably sat and watched the hour and a half long episodes of Stranger Things.
Yeah.
So
They're all that long?
Yeah, so if you watch it's literally two Stranger Things episodes. Like
Also, that is like just a cultural disconnect.
Yeah.
Like it like runtimes are arbitrary and runtimes are culturally like kind of constructed. Like what is a normal runtime? And people who listen to our SRK series last year know this, but like in India, movies just are 3 hours, like in general.
Well, also
it's
we
not a
make
big
plenty.
deal.
Like if you are into Avengers or something like that,
well, it's like 30 minutes longer than like the last Marvel movie, the Doctor Strange movie. It's 30 minutes longer than that. I mean,
and also like they're structured differently too because of that. Like the way that I often think about Bollywood movies is they're like two movies. Let's say you're watching a double feature. A lot of times you'll get a plot arc and then like it ends, and then a lot of times there's an intermission. And then there's a totally separate plot arc that's like a continuation of the first one, but it's like the sequel of the movie you just watched. You're watching both of them.
Are incredible.
Yeah, it does. It kind of does. It gives you about an hour and a half of just you learn about these characters. You let their kind of friendship blossom. So then the last hour and a half where it's being, it's being kind of put to strife and you have all these conflicts. It does pay off a little bit more because you're just like, yeah, you built it up. So I would highly recommend watching it. It's like I said, it's on Netflix. I mean, it's like one of those, like if it's like a rainy day outside, you can't do anything, like turn this on and just watch it for 3 hours. It is just crazy insane. And it has some incredible like musical sequences in it as well as action sequences. So
make a nice night out of it. We're planning on getting some takeout from our favorite Indian place here in Knoxville and settling in and having a good night with it. I'm excited.
Yeah. So, all right, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to be back talking bargains and Faust after this.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Sorry, I talked too long.
No, it's just that
I know
you were kind of just recounting the plot, and I'm like, yeah, they can watch the movie.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
That's
why I'm here to just kind of go. It's been 30 minutes of shit posting, guys.
Oh, guys, I'm really sorry.
No, you're
I'm gonna go
fine.
to the bathroom. BRB.
I'm gonna be back. Can I pause this? Guess not. All right, I'm gonna be back in 5 minutes. I gotta go grab laundry real quick.
Okay. I thought that was your smoke alarm.
This exciting intermission for our viewers.
So anyway, that's what I was telling you about Zach, about how kind of my true thoughts.
That's good. That's so good. You're so funny.
Anyways, what I was saying, which was just us having a private conversation, but is maybe a cool sneak peek for people who are watching this about content that's coming out. So Seth You know him, you love him, Seth Troyer. He has another podcast called The Unwatchables, and where they watch movies that are notoriously hard to watch, like Solo, for example. Anyways, he wants to have me/us on as a guest soon. And he proposed, or he gave me a long list of movies, and I suggested Crash. Would you like to go on Seth's podcast talk about Crash?
I don't know. I'll
No?
think about it. But that's cool for him. But
Yeah.
is Crash?
She's a one podcast gal.
I'm a little
Podcast
podcast
monogamous.
She's monogamous with her podcast.
Yeah. I don't know. No, I mean it sounds awesome. I just sometimes I feel like a dope on this podcast. So does anybody else really want me to join their podcast?
I don't know. It'll be great.
Also, Crash is a good movie. Like full stop.
Oh,
Why is
yeah.
it on
It
an
rules.
unwatchables list? I don't know if we should be saying this. Like legally, it might be, top secret.
YouTube viewers get the inside scoop.
Hello, YouTube.
Inside
Watchers.
scoop. Like the YouTube watchers learn that the queen is dead.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never believe what they say next.
Oh my gosh.
All right, let's talk Faust.
Let's do it.
All right, y'all ready?
We
Yeah.
are ready, I think.
Here we go. En uno, dos, tres. And welcome back to part 2 of episode 407 of Cinematary. In this part, we're going to be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1926's Faust, directed by F.W. Murnau from a script by Hans Kaiser. The film stars Gösta Ekman, Emil Jannings, and Camilla Horn. The demon Mephisto makes a bet with an archangel that's a good man's soul can be corrupted. Mephisto sets his sights on the thoughtful old alchemist Faust, who is desperately trying to save his village from a plague. He is able to help the villagers thanks to Mephisto, but further dealings with the devil lead Faust on a decadent downward spiral. Can he redeem his soul before it's too late? Faust was Murnau's last German film, and directly afterward, he moved to the U.S. under contract to William Fox to direct Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans in 1927. When the film premiered in the Ufa Palast am Zoo in Berlin, Murnau was already shooting in Hollywood. It has been praised for its special effects and is regarded as an example of German expressionist film. Murnau was able to rely on an excellent cast led by Emil Jannings as Mephisto, who was made famous by his role in Murnau's The Last Laugh. Swedish theater actor Gösta Ekman played Faust, and Camilla Horn, who would have a successful acting career in Germany after a brief passage in America, played Gretchen. And the supporting cast were William Dietrich, who would become a well-known American director, along with Yvette Gilbert, who was a famous French cabaret singer, actress, and writer. Murnau wanted Lillian Gish to play Gretchen, but she insisted that the film be shot by her favorite cinematographer, Charles Roscher. Leni Riefenstahl applied for the female lead role, but was turned down. So, unfortunately, we just have one Nazi in this movie, not two.
I do like that the Nazi that we have in this movie is the demon character.
Yeah, it checks out. With all those misgivings, Emil Jannings, great actor, you know. But Murnau's Faust was the most technically elaborate and expensive production undertaken by UFA until it was surpassed by Metropolis the following year. Oh, wow. Filming took 6 months at a cost of 2 million marks. Only half were recovered at the box office. According to film historians, Faust seriously affected studio shooting and special effects techniques. Murnau used 2 cameras, both filming multiple shots. Many scenes were filmed time and again. As an example, a short sequence of the contract being written on parchment and fire took an entire day to film. There were several versions created of the film, several of them prepared by Murnau himself. The versions are quite different from one another. Some scenes have variants on pace, others have actors with different costumes, and some use different camera angles. For example, a scene with a bear was shot with both a person in costume and an actual bear. In some versions, the bear simply stands there. In one version, it actually strikes an actor.
What edition did you watch, by the way, Zach? I watched the Kino Blu-ray.
I watched the Kino as well.
Yeah.
Overall, 5 versions of Faust are known to exist out of the over 30 copies found across the globe. A German original version, of which the only surviving copy is in the Danish Film Institute. A French version, a late German version, which exists in 2 copies. A bilingual version for Europe prepared by UFA. And a version prepared by Murnau himself for MGM in the US market. The copy of the original German version lacks a number of scenes. With the copies available, a 106-minute reconstructed version has been released by Kino Lorber with English intertitles on DVD. The US version includes titles and scenes filmed especially by Murnau. For example, the scene in which Marth offers Mephisto a drink that he rejects as causing heartburn. In the US version, Mephisto rejects the drink for having had alcohol, an ironic reference to prohibition in the United States. Again, in the US version, Mephisto offers Marta a necklace from the Great Khan of the Tartars, rather than the cousin from Lombardy, as Murnau believed the US audience would not have heard of Lombardy. One scene was done with a text juxtaposition, as again, Murnau believed the American audience wouldn't grasp the imagery by itself. This is also the only version having the originally conceived finale of the ascension of Faust and Gretchen into heaven. In all others, the scene is rather more conceptual. Books appearing in the film were labeled, or any plans with text were shot twice in German and in English. Faust was a financial flop. German critics disliked the adaptation from its source text and Gösta Ekman's performance. In later years, though, the film has been called one of the 7 canonical examples of German expressionist cinema. Let's talk a little bit about Faust. Had y'all seen this before?
No.
So what were your impressions?
Well, so I have not seen this movie before, but I am pretty familiar with the Faust story. If I could give just like a little bit of context for like what filter I'm kind of looking at this movie through. When I was in undergrad, I did a independent study one semester with a professor of mine who taught both Shakespeare classes and a Bible as literature class. And we did this independent study on hell and Satan in literature. Like I wanted to read all of the like major canonical texts that are about like the character of Satan, including the ones that are in the Bible. Right. And so as part of that class, I read the 3 big versions of Faust that people read. There's Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. There's Goethe's Faust. We read part 1. Part 2 is kind of like a sequel thing. And then we read Mikhail Bulgakov's Master and the Margarita, which is kind of like a postmodern Soviet sort of riff on the Faust story. And I think that this is my favorite version of Faust, this movie. It is so good. Like the ways that it changes the story, I think change it for the better. Like thematically, it is a stronger, more interesting movie. It is a much like more streamlined and less messy story than some of the other ones. I think the way that it handles the female character in the last half is so much better than a lot of the other stories. But it was also kind of a fascinating cultural artifact to kind of see so many tropes sort of being codified or played with. One of my main things I learned from that class was that like every trope comes from somewhere, right? All the things that you associate with hell and the devil, they did not come all of a sudden as part of like a Bible story somewhere. They kind of got tacked on like one after another over the course of this timeline when like very famous stories like Dante's Inferno, for example, get written about hell. They like capture the public's imagination and they kind of like add to that in their like cultural myth of this place and this character. And it was interesting in this movie, like how many things I could see like being referenced elsewhere. And I don't know if they were necessarily done here first, or if like this is tapping into kind of a new-ish trope at the time. But like one example would be the shot early on of the devil like towering over the city looks like in Disney's Fantasia, The Night on Bald Mountain, sequence, which like is almost definitely pulling from this, right? There's also like kind of a weird overlap between like devil mythology and vampire mythology. Like Mephisto looks like Todd Browning's Dracula, or the Dracula in the Todd Browning movie, and this predates it. And I'm wondering if Dracula was pulled, like the look of Dracula was pulled from here. And then like vampires, like I know the vampire story kind of like goes back a couple hundred years before this. It's like Mary Shelley and all of her people. Like that's kind of where that comes from. But like there's overlap between like how vampires work and how demons and the devil work. Like the whole thing about him not being able to touch or look at a cross. Like now we associate that primarily with vampires. But I think that was a relatively new thing for how people thought about demons as well. I don't know. That might have been like a folktale thing.
No, I mean to add to your thing. I mean, I would think that definitely American directors were watching Murnau stuff, including this, because he brought it with him. Because I mean, he's highly influential, even on people like John Ford. John Ford was obsessed with Murnau and like watched a lot of his German movies, whether it was Last Laugh or this, and took inspiration for his movies from it. Yeah. So it's probably true that Todd Browning probably saw Faust or something like that and took the inspiration.
So that's like my long-winded just kind of context about the movie. Short version is I think this movie rules. I think it's so good. And I will turn it over to somebody else. We can talk about specifics later.
I mean, I think one of the things that kind of sets it apart maybe from others of this era is kind of the horror spin to it. Because it is, I wouldn't say scary, but it's definitely got some like really intense, maybe scary for then audience moments. Like you said, some of the special effects are just like really, really, really cool how they do it. Crafting the contract that he's going to sign, or there's a scene, is it like right when he turns Faust young or something, where there's just so much like hyperimposition where the demon character like looks really large and transparent, and just the way that they play with size and transparency throughout the movie with kind of like with deities, or just even with this like supernatural, like, call towards, like at the end where she's calling towards him. The way
she calls towards him, and like superimposed on top of that, there's like this shot over this model city. Really, really cool.
I think, or in the beginning of the movie, there's a really cool scene where these like demons are like riding into.
Oh yeah.
The Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
That's the first shot. I think.
Yeah, and
that's strong.
It looks so incredible. I don't know if they're puppets or exactly what kind of things that they use, but the way that, the craft of them looks really cool, and then just the way that they're like moving and there's this fire around it. I think it's a really, at times it's a very visually interesting and pretty movie, and I mean obviously he put a lot of work into making those special effects what they were, and it looks incredible. I think as a story, it felt also really timely, like that we're all living in our own version of a plague right now.
Yeah. There were so many things about the movie that felt prescient, like the stuff with the plague in the first half, and the stuff with like the baby in the second half.
What I think is always so frustrating, and it's nothing that you're going to do about it with, we have such like a black and white view on, or like, I don't know, Christianity especially is such a black and white view of, like you're either a Christian or you're like a no good heathen who deserves to die, and there's nothing in between. And you like can accept God, or you're going to be like an outright, like wretched being. And it, that's not just like historically accurate, but it's tragic too, because you see in the romance that one of like the biggest pivotal moments in the movie is when they end up having sex with each other, and it
are about to, I think maybe don't actually do it.
Oh
no, she has a baby. She does. Yeah.
And like there's really nothing, I think the movie even suggests there's nothing unpure about like their relationship, because they're in love, and but it's a product of their time, and it's like they succumbed to the ill, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like specifically like the Madonna horror complex.
Yeah.
Like as soon as she expresses any sense of sexual agency, she is like completely unclean in that regard, right?
Which is funny because the brother comes back and he's like,
how are the men?
Yeah, he's like, you're so pretty. How are the men? And she's like, that's weird that you're my brother and you said that.
Right.
and then she finds a man. He's like, you whore, kill her.
Speaking of
I like
the
how he
brother
gets murdered and then talks for another 3
Yeah.
minutes.
He's like, how could you?
He's like, how could you? Let me just get this out. So
well,
how could you?
That's a very Shakespeare thing. Like when a character dies, they will often monologue while they're on their last breaths. And
be
like
shoving the knife and more like
the most famous example of this is a Shakespeare play that I feel like is referenced directly in this, Romeo and Juliet, where Mercutio is dying. He has this like really fucking long monologue because he's like a loudmouth character. But there's like a 1-2 punch of things happening in this version of the story that I think is just pulled directly from Romeo and Juliet. There is the balcony scene, her opening the window and doing like "Wherefore art thou, Romeo," and like there he is.
He's right there.
And then they consummate their affair or whatever. And then he ends up killing the brother in the next scene, which is what happens with Romeo and Juliet when Romeo kills Tybalt, who's Juliet's brother. But in Romeo and Juliet, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like Romeo kills Tybalt just because Tybalt is an asshole and Tybalt's like always out starting fights. Here it's specifically because of that relationship. Tybalt didn't even know about Romeo and Juliet's relationship. Like I feel like this is such a tight story in a way that like it's tighter than other Faust stories, and it's tighter than some of the other things that it's referencing, including Shakespeare. So
yeah,
very, very cool little plot turnaround on that, I thought.
So this is the first time I've seen it since I did my essay.
Yeah.
It's such a visually, or like what really stands out over anything is like the art. We've talked about it, but the art direction and the set direction and the art design there. You have that sequence like you were referencing where he's like shadowing over the city, and I love their use of like they use like miniatures and such all the time in this movie. And yeah, I mean, I can see why this was kind of the technical achievement until a year later with Metropolis, which is also a visually stunning movie. Like, because it really just, to me, this feels like a personification of like movie magic, because it's just, you really feel embodied in this world and in this mythology and everything. It feels, it's such a stark comparison to kind of where movies have gone now, because it does feel like you can tell it's fake, but there's really like this just kind of warm handcrafting to it, where you know, a lot of the sequences, the way that they'll use smoke and the way that they'll frame the characters, it's just so you have so many shots. You have the one when I think it's when the brother's initially murdered, and like you have this very prototypical German expressionist shot where he's like laying in the street and the light is
like a big diagonal beam.
Yeah, it's like against the wall and it's on the street, but everything else is black.
Yeah.
Which feels very akin to like a lot of Caligari and a lot of Fritz Lang's type movies where he just kind of makes that jagged scenery.
Zach, I know you're like the German expressionist expert on the podcast, since you've like read a bunch of books about it and stuff like that, or about the movement. A thing that feels true to me, that I don't know how true it actually is that in this movie has a little bit more like texture and depth than a lot of German expressionist movies. Like there's the jagged thing that shows up a little bit here, that you see in Caligari. And then there's like the spectacle that you see here that also shows up in Metropolis. But one thing that I feel like is very true about the way this movie looks is I just feel like there's a lot of layers to the image. Like there's a lot of different like, superimposition of smoke and shadow. And it feels like you're not necessarily looking at a flat plane. it feels like the image is alive in a way that a lot of times no silent movies do to me.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, the thing with no, I definitely agree. And honestly, it's kind of funny. I think I like the last. I put it on the ballot. I like the last laugh more than
Oh,
this
really?
one. I think, yeah, just the story of that, and it really has some striking imagery as well. Is really effective. Um, the thing you got to remember with German expressionism in the way. So it's not just like let's have slanty lines and lighting and things like that. And you
Yeah.
think of Caligari when he's on the bridge and it's like and he's like kind of it's all about the subconscious. It's all about kind of feeding into that. So yeah, a lot of this imagery is baked in with meaning and thoughtfulness because it's supposed to kind of lead you into Faust's subconscious, into just kind of this town and ruin. It's the German expressionism was bred out of the anxiety just in general, but also the economic anxiety of World War One, where the whole world just left Germany to rot after that war. And so the German people were very distraught. They had nowhere to work. They were completely, just depressed in general. So on that level, like after doing all this research, I'm like, I get why they followed like Hitler and the Nazis, like, because what other choice did they have? The world literally gave them the middle finger and they couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have like that baked in that like, no one's here to really help us. We have to kind of, and that's what's so impactful about the Faust character, because he very much, he's kind of trying to be proactive and help the people, because he's like, we're not getting any divine help. Like we're completely left on our own and isolated. And you can feel that baked into the image.
This is a thing that I think is more impactful to me because of the context of the other stories, because Faust's motivation is completely different in this movie than it is in like the myth. So in both the Marlowe version and the Goethe version, he is just a guy he's like a scientist, and he's obsessed with like uncovering forbidden knowledge. And he like wants to know too much, which is very similar to like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, right? But here, his intentions are actually noble. He decides to sell his soul to the devil specifically because like people were dying of plague, which is interesting that Murnau would make this, because like Nosferatu, like the whole thing is just an allegory for plague. But here he only is willing to sell a soul to the devil because God is not doing anything for these people. Like he lives in the era where religion and science are kind of one and the same, but the religious like figure that has like dedicated his life to just like appears to be completely absent. And there's that great scene early on when there's like a street preacher who's like telling people to stop going out in the streets and partying because there's a plague on, which is kind of interesting considering like in COVID era, what like the religious right kind of argued for almost the opposite. Right. And like that preacher who's thinking like, well, you should stay home and like pray and like believe that God will heal you. That preacher then dies like in that scene of plague. And like, it's interesting that the movie kind of has a difficult needle to thread here, where it is kind of acknowledging the fact that science, like medicine, is not the same as prayer. Like God cannot save you from an illness just by praying to him. But it's also kind of implying that the cause of the illness is this like dark supernatural figure. It's the devil, right? But ultimately, like, I'm kind of circling back around to the point that you were making, Zach, of like the devil is only kind of proposed as a solution to a problem that like religion and like our complete adherence to religion has caused. Right.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it again, going back to the World War I metaphor. I mean, you kind of have like they were proposed by the devil, and I mean, what were they supposed to do? Again, like the Treaty of Versailles pretty much shackled their trade to a standstill. There was that they were, you watch stuff like The Street and other early expressionist movies that aren't like as deeply textured as something like Caligari or this or Metropolis, but is like seeped in that like depressed subconscious of. I mean, you have like the weight lines and things like that, people trying to get food, and it's not because they were. It's strictly because the rest of the world limited them. And so then they had the devil come and propose something. We're like, hey, let's like, why are we sad? Why are we not working? Why are we not proud of being German? And so they got sucked into that. And yeah, it was a tragic end, but like at the same time, if you're in the seat of the Germans in the 30s, it makes sense because they're sitting there going, we have no will to live. And you think about it.
Well, fascism offers easy answers
exactly
to complicated problems.
Blame somebody else.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's interesting about is kind of fascinated me about German expressionist films is that you have those movies that are really like the antithesis of how people view the movement, but are very seeped. I think at the heart of the movement is this kind of economic anxiety and just cultural anxiety of, finding an identity. And they kind of dove into the subconscious to figure out their identity because the reality was unsatisfactory.
I think it has like a kind of generous ending with regards to, I don't know, Christianity and redemption, where it's not like at the end of the movie he says, "Oh Lord, I have forsaken you, please forgive me," or something like that.
Right.
And then God's like, "See, he came back to me after all." Like the redemption for him is just basically like pursuing this love that is very genuine and pure and not evil. And then like, they end up together in the end, in a way. I don't know how much I should say or not say about.
It's 100-year-old. It's a multiple 100-year-old folk tale.
I mean, end up. He ends up finding her, and they burn at the stake together.
Yeah,
like one does sometimes.
And they were talking about that because this came out 2 or 3 years in that range after Passion of Joan of Arc, the Dreyer film, which feels very like you can kind of feel the influences of that in that scene.
But like in the last scene in the movie is basically, I guess, a discussion between God and the devil, and God saying like, "See, I won. He came back to me at the end," but he really didn't. I mean, it's more like he rejected kind of like a completely pleasure-seeking life for like a relationship that was special to him. And it wasn't because they had sex that they like sinned and were awful, but it was more, I don't know.
Well, it's like
it was interesting.
This version is portrayed as like a Job story.
Yeah.
Like, can the devil tempt, one of God's most devoted servants? And he does. Like he burns his Bible, he signs his name to the devil. But he, like you said, he doesn't come around and like then devote his life to Jesus again at the end of the movie. He instead sort of pursues this more abstract, generalized notion of goodness and light and just like living an ethical life. And like the goodness that he pursues exists completely outside of any sort of religious institution. Right. Which again, the religious institution in this movie, completely worthless. Like, do not help anybody's lives. Only like shame and harm people. There's also, I love this thing. I don't remember if this is in any of the earlier versions of the story or not. But the female character who's named different things in different versions of the story is like wandering around with her like dying baby and asking if she can like stay somewhere and like get food for her dying baby. And it's just like literally a no room at the inn, retelling of the Jesus story. But it's like the Christian church who won't give her any sort of support. Yeah, it felt like a real, like, I don't know. I feel like, some of the arguments you hear a lot with, like anti-abortion movement stuff is, we want the baby to be born,
and yay, the baby is born. But also, if you wanted to be able to like afford to feed your baby, you probably should have thought about that before you spread your legs and had sex, or you should have just waited till marriage like we told you to. We're not going to help you because you're just asking for handouts.
Right.
And it's like, if we just, could be realistic about the fact. Also, it's like they don't, Jesus was all about helping the poor and the orphans and the this and that and that. But in practice, all of these people are like, we're not helping you. And then her baby literally dies. And then they're like, you killed your baby because you couldn't feed your baby.
You're a murderer. Yeah. You're a baby murderer.
Where it's like, you gave her no future because she decided to have sex once before marriage. And then you're blaming her for being homeless on the streets and unable to afford food for herself or her baby. And now you're going to burn her and like kill her. I mean, it's like cool to think about too, now that like we're going to overturn Roe v. Wade here in a few weeks or something.
Right.
But anyway, I digress.
What were you about to say, Zach?
No, I was just going to say, you literally have the one woman who's like, aren't you the girl who was the whore?
Yeah.
And he's like, no.
So it just, a lot of it felt weirdly timely. Still.
And like what that reminds me of is like, there's no room for redemption. Like this is a story about redemption.
Right.
It's a story about Faust's redemption. And like, to what extent can, what can be forgiven? How deep in depravity can you sink and still be forgiven by God?
Mm-hmm.
And it's even more so than Job, I think, because in Job, it's like, I need to reread Job. It's been a long time. Will you disown God? And the question is he going to do that? And like, ultimately the answer is no, he doesn't disown God or deny God. Here, Faust does deny God and goes like way further than that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is like, well, can he come back from that?
Mm-hmm.
Can he come back from literally signing his name in blood in the devil's book?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is yes. He
kind
can.
of, but he's like, again, it's not like he goes back and he's like, God, I shouldn't have left you.
It's an extremely compassionate and generous vision of like what the Christian God or the Judeo-Christian God
like with
could
practicing Christianity.
And that's where I was going to go next. Is like the people who practice that offer no redemption for like extremely common human experiences. Like having a baby out of wedlock, right?
So you should
like
die.
A thing that you're biologically kind of wired to want to do.
Yeah.
We don't offer any redemption. Like our religion is about redemption for all, but we don't really give it.
God forgives, but we don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it was just, I felt like the movie was like kind of generous and sort of positive towards Christianity by the end, wherein not like the people who in the movie are Christians, but more like
the
God
idea
himself of the movie is like, it was really messed up what happened to you, and I appreciate that you guys kind of like pulled through by the end. So good job, guys. And that's nice. I don't know. Even though it's like a super sad ending and stuff.
Zach, I have more of a another meta question for you. Do you have any idea why this is not considered like one of the German Expressionism movies that people tend to go to? Like when people get into German Expressionism or they learn about it in school or something, it's always like Nosferatu, Caligari, Metropolis. Like those are the movies. I like Faust more than like all those movies personally. Why do you think this one doesn't get as much discussion?
I think it's in that realm. It does. Maybe it's not as like pronounced as the other ones, but I think it's still. I mean, like I mentioned,
there's at least two other Murnau movies that get viewed more than this: Sunrise and Nosferatu. Yeah,
Sunrise is a little bit of a cheat though, because it is German Expressionist, but it's
American.
It's been made in the American studio system. And I mean, I think Nosferatu. I think because of its history as kind of like this canonical vampire story, it also has kind of permeated into popular culture to a degree. I mean, you have the whole you literally have a joke about Nosferatu and SpongeBob.
Right.
But even in other ways, it's permeated into popular culture. I mean, Werner Herzog, we talked about it, but Werner Herzog, did a movie I think it just kind of has like this permeating factor. I think Caligari, because it's so, that's why, as I said before, it's kind of like what people envision as a German expressionist movie. I think Metropolis, because of how like grand in scale it is. But I think this one still is considered the one. I think that is exceptional, that always gets left out, is M.
M is so good. I checked that out from the library today as well. We're gonna watch it.
Yeah, that's one that I think is more underseen than Faust. That I'm like, this movie slaps. It
really
good.
does. Yeah,
and it's spooky as hell.
I don't know that I've ever seen a German expressionist movie before this.
You've seen Nosferatu.
Oh, I've seen Nosferatu,
Yeah.
And that was a really cool experience when we saw it, because we saw it with a live score. But
yeah. Speaking of live scores, I think both the scores on the Kino edition of this movie are pretty weak sauce.
Yeah.
I desperately want a like doom metal score for this movie. Like I need it to be satanic sounding.
I think that's like just a really fun, like Knoxville does this thing called Nosferatu, and it started with showing Nosferatu, but now they just do other like kind of older movies, and they have somebody every year come and do a live score with it.
It's usually William Wright, who
really awesome.
He live scored Battleship Potemkin with us.
Yes, and that was phenomenal. Cool. And I mean, these aren't the kind of movies that I have a lot of exposure to, or would normally go out of my way to see. But I really liked this one, and I was thinking to myself, like, man, if this had a score like what we've seen live before, this would really, really be cool to see.
Yeah.
But in general, yeah, I would say like I don't have a lot of exposure to this specific category of movie, and I liked it a lot.
I think the German expressionist movies are generally the go-to early silent movies, just because of how visually striking they are. Like Faust, and Metropolis, and Caligari are just so visually, so that you don't get as stuck in the dialogue and things like that. You know, like what we talked a little bit about last week. You get more into like you at least, even if you're not paying attention to the dialogue or things like that, or like the back and forth, you're watching like just the stunning scope of these movies. And so I think this is the kind of, if you're like, I want to watch early international movies, I think German expressionism is usually the one they go to, because you can pop on Caligari or Metropolis, and even if the people aren't engaged in what the movie's doing on a narrative level, they'll be entertained on a cinematic level.
Yeah. I mean, as they should, I think. I mean, silent comedy and German expressionism, like, to me, are the best versions of silent movies, just because they are the ones that are taking the greatest advantage of the medium as a visual storytelling.
Yeah, and German expressionism is such a massive influence, not only because people liked him, but because Murnau, Lang, Ernst Lubitsch, who we talked about? Paul Linney from last week. I mean, those are all German directors who came to America and started making movies. So that this kind of, it's definitely tame versions of them, but it's like that kind of creative process was infused into the American studio system in the 30s. Yeah. So, any final thoughts?
No, to my previous point about, this being maybe an underseen or underappreciated German expressionist film, it's surprising to me that it's taken us 8 volumes of Young Critics Watch Old Movies to get to this one. But I'm really glad that we did. I would not have watched it if not for Young Critics Watch Old Movies. So
thanks,
glad I saw it.
Thanks for voting.
I still would have gone with The Last Laugh.
I'll need to watch it.
All right, would like to watch Dr. Cabinet of Dr. Caligari too.
And M.
An M.
It's good too. The last thing I'll say is that Emil Janning's great actor, but was a Nazi.
Was a Nazi.
What are you gonna do?
The Queen is
you
dead.
do not, under any circumstances, gotta hand it to him.
Great actor though. He really has some great roles. It's just disappointing. All right, well, that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we got all the movies that we talked about in this episode. if you would like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/cinematary. Thank you so much to our patrons: Cam, Chad Newsom, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Teresa Marsathi, Titus Arthur, and Tyler Chandler. We greatly appreciate your patronage. Next week, we have our Young Critics Watch Old Movie series continuing with 1933's King Kong, which is going to be an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in that one.
I have never seen King Kong, and I put myself on that episode just to make myself watch it. So looking forward to it.
It's like I say, it's going to be an interesting one because it is an important history movie for sure, but also is deeply problematic.
Wow, how'd that end up on the list?
Well, I mean, I think that the guiding ethos of Young Critics Watch Old Movies is like we're not necessarily watching our favorite movies. We're watching the movies that feel like important to watch to understand film history, right?
Yeah, like the last 3 years we've had the Jazz Singer with Al Jolson and blackface on
Never
here, but
wins. Yeah.
I'm
Never
bummed.
wins.
I really want to watch it, so we might just need to find a way to get it in the series, like a series or something sometime. Because I think it would be worthwhile. I mean, you got to watch that stuff to understand. You don't have to sit there and be like, "This is amazing. I love the decision he made."
What a bold artistic choice.
Great. All right. On that note, we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Stay cool.